thank you for inviting me to come this morning. As Cale said, I'm a member of Warren County MCOM, and I'm here to introduce that group, that volunteer group to you today. And I'm glad that you're a service group, because we're a service group. Maybe not as well known as you, but we hope that our attitude toward serving the community is mirroring yours. So I think there's a symbiosis there, and maybe you'll see that after we do this presentation. So let's jump right into it. Right, turn my. There. So first things first, what in the world is amateur radio? I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand if you do or do not know what amateur radio is. I'm just going to put us all on equal footing and give you a very brief overview. You may know amateur radio by its more well-known slang term, ham radio. And either term is acceptable. But the thing about amateur radio is that it is not my grandfather's hobby. I remember as a child, images of my grandfather hunched over a telegraph key, punching out Morse code to his friends all around the country and around the world. We can still do that, and there are people who do that on a regular basis, and it has a very important place in amateur radio. However, the hobby has really stayed with the times. You may not know that there's about 750,000 amateur radio operators licensed in the United States right now. And although it's a small percentage of the overall population, it's actually the highest it's ever been in the country. One thing it also is not, is it's not citizen band radio. Most people are aware of citizen band radio, and anybody can go buy a CB radio, stick it in their vehicle, turn on the power, key up the microphone, and start talking. Amateur radio is not like that. Amateur radio is carefully controlled by the Federal Communications Commission, and we have to take a test in order to be licensed. And there's some reasons for that I'll go into in just a moment, but it's just very different than either my grandfather's hobby or the CB radio. You could also read this chart, right? None of you can read this chart. And I didn't intend for you to read it, but this chart has 7 bars on it, 7 horizontal bars on it, and those bars represent the entire radio frequency spectrum that the FCC regulates. And just to give you an idea, so I'm pointing out the commercial radio bands. So everybody's familiar with the AM radio that was in their first car. The AM radio stations are licensed by the FCC to operate in that portion of the radio spectrum that I've highlighted there. FM radio, like the River 95.3, it operates in that little section of blue that's circled below. All of the other colors are the different radio services in this country, whether it be aviation or marine band or radio location devices, and there's little chunks of it all over the spectrum. Commercial radio is called commercial radio because they sell commercials to fund their operations. Amateur radio is called amateur radio in part because we cannot sell or get paid for operating our radios. So we just can't have any kind of monetary remuneration for what we do. The FCC, in its goodness to us, has allowed us sections of all portions of the radio spectrum in which to operate. Radio amateurs are by nature experimenters, inventors, and so that's one of the reasons that it's not my grandfather's hobby anymore, because guys like to build their own radios, build their own antennas, write software to make their computers and their radios work together. And the different sections of the radio spectrum, I'll say different frequencies, are good for different types of communication. So some of it is good for local communication, some for regional, some for worldwide communication. Some is better at night, some is better at day, some is better in summer, and some are better in winter. And so the FCC has granted us those privileges all across the spectrum to experiment and to learn and actually to invent new things that end up getting used in by other radio services. I said we have to take a test to get licensed. The FCC currently issues 3 different licenses. You have to take a proctored exam. If you pass your exam, the FCC issues a license, and that license gives you certain privileges. As you advance in the 3 different licenses that are available, you get expanded privileges. So if you have their highest level license, you're allowed to operate in any one of those areas. So we've already covered what is amateur radio. Now we're going to talk about MCOM. I said the group is Warren County MCOM. MCOM is just an easy way to abbreviate the notion of emergency communication. Somewhat self-explanatory. Our group, we call it Warren County MCOM. I think officially it's the Warren County Amateur Radio Emergency Communications Group. We think Warren County MCOM rolls off the tongue just a little bit better. So what we are is we are a group of amateur radio operators who have dedicated their time, their capabilities, and if necessary, their equipment to assist Warren County in times of a disaster or any emergency that compromises normal communications capabilities. So, Cale told you a little bit about me. I was originally licensed as a young teen in 1972. The problem with being licensed as a young teen in 1972 is you then become a not so young teen and you have all of those distractions that come with being a young man. So I did let my license expire after doing very little with it as a young teen. But when I became an adult, I ended up with a 30-plus year career in construction. I was an electrician, I was a draftsman, I worked at a building department, doing plans examining. I became the building official and emergency manager for the city of La Quinta, California, out near Palm Springs. And the thing about if you work for a municipality or the state of California, you are by law a disaster service worker. And that means that your employer can hold you over or call you back in whenever necessary, for as long as necessary, and you have to do what you have to do. So I had emergency responsibilities when I worked for the city of La Quinta. Although I fiddled around through my youth and didn't finish college, I didn't finish my bachelor's degree until I was 50 years old, which was the same year that my daughter finished her master's degree. But so I was motivated at my graduation to pursue my master's degree. I thought I might want to teach at the collegiate level, and master's was kind of a minimum entry requirement. So the problem was my bachelor's degree was in management, and I looked at the curriculum for a master's in that realm, and I thought I'll never finish. I just won't. But I was convinced by one of the professors to look into emergency management, and I saw that it was kind of an emerging field. It was interesting to me. The other interesting thing, as Cale mentioned, living and working in a city that's 12 miles from the southern San Andreas Fault, knowing full well that it wasn't a matter of if, but when the big one was going to hit, I thought, a master's degree in emergency and disaster management just might come in handy. And so I was able to use my studies with my employment to put me in a better situation to help the community there. And so I had responsibilities to educate the community on things they could do to prepare. I had to train city staff in order to fill their duties in our emergency operations center. Again, as Cale said, I retired in 2014 and within a week moved to Virginia. And I have not regretted it for a moment. In fact, just to give you some perspective, it's pretty hot in the desert of Southern California right now. One of my friends posted on Facebook yesterday, only in the Southern California desert would they say that 106 degrees was mild in the 40 days. So I don't miss that too much. As soon as I moved here, I was able to connect with a few people and got myself involved with the group Warren County MCOM. The guy who started the group is a great friend of mine. However, a few months ago, he came to me and said, look, I'm getting a little older. My hearing's not what it used to be. Greg, I think it's time for us to switch roles. You become the leader of the group. I'll be your assistant. And so that's how I became the leader of Warren County MCOM. So our primary customer is Warren County Fire and Rescue Services. And the reason for that is the Board of Supervisors has delegated the day-to-day emergency management responsibilities in Warren County to the fire chief, who then in turn delegates the minutia of that to his Deputy Emergency Manager by the name of Rick Farrell. Some of you may know Rick. He's a great guy. He's a firefighter, EMT, but his primary duty is the cost recovery manager and Deputy Emergency Manager for the county. And so Warren County MCOM reports to Rick, and he's been very helpful and supportive of everything we want to do. He knows that he's going to be in a tough position if we have a disaster here in Warren County, and is glad that we're available to help him. He's been really good about spending some emergency management grant money to purchase some additional equipment for us. And we enjoy working with him, and he's incorporating us into his emergency plans. We have other partners in the community. Most of you know that Cale used to work for the Sheriff's Department, and because the Emergency Operations Center is in the Public Safety Building, which of course the Sheriff owns, we had to ask permission to put some antennas on the roof of that building, and Cale was instrumental in helping coordinate those efforts for us, and so we have this great relationship with the Sheriff's Office. Then, of course, Cale changed jobs, and now we have a relationship with the Police Department. So that worked out pretty well for me. I hope it did for him as well. So much so that we're hoping, and I believe you and your staff are hoping, that we can have a permanent presence of amateur radio within the new police station. All we have to do is figure out how to pay for it, right?
That's what it always boils down to.
Okay, so maybe there's some happy dollars floating around. But the point is that fire and law enforcement know that we exist and know that we're out there ready to help them out. We also have a relationship with the Valley Health System. As you know, they have Warren Memorial Hospital here in this county, but they also have Page Memorial Hospital, Shenandoah Memorial Hospital. They have Winchester Medical Center, and then they have 2 facilities in West Virginia. We have radios currently installed in Warren Memorial Hospital. We test them periodically. We were privileged to participate in an exercise with Valley Health just last month. They simulated a complete communications outage system-wide. And because we had part of our group that could go over to Warren Memorial, we were able to communicate inside the hospital from their emergency department on the ground floor to their command center on the 3rd floor. And they were pretty pleased about that. But even better than that was we had a colleague in Shenandoah County at Shenandoah Memorial Hospital, and we were able to communicate from the command center at Warren Memorial down to the command center at Shenandoah. And now they think we're like the best things in sliced bread. So we're okay with that. So it's just nice to have partners in the community that know that we're out there to help them. So the way that we help, and I always want to make sure people know that amateur radio is not a silver bullet. We live in a technologically driven society today. I mean, probably everybody in the room here has a cell phone, maybe a computer at home, maybe more than one. But we depend on our cell phones, we depend on the internet, we communicate on a daily basis very quickly. I mean, you think about your cell phone has more computing power than the lunar module that first landed on the moon with Apollo 11. And yet we have that more than that in the palm of our hand. We can do many of the things that in amateur radio that you would do on a normal basis, but we can't do everything. And we can't do it as quickly. But if nothing works, amateur radio is going to be way better than getting on your bicycle and trying to ride to Richmond with a message. So that's my disclaimer. We're not a silver bullet. We can do a lot of things because this is a modern hobby now. We're very cost effective to make this up. I told you earlier we're amateur radio because we cannot charge for our services. So if Cale needs us or if Rick needs us, we're free.
We like free.
For the budget.
We are readily deployable. Most of our members, of course, you know, radios today are, again, my grandfather's radio was this behemoth on his table. We have radio, you can still get a radio that's a behemoth, I guess, but most modern radios are much smaller. So I've got one that's, you know, the size of a small book. We have handheld radios that are probably the size of a package of cigarettes. A number of our group members also have their radios in what's called a Go box or a Go kit. And so I have, for example, I have one of my radios in a Pelican case. So it's like a suitcase type thing. It's got a battery in it. It's got the radio in it, the microphone, a speaker, a couple other accessories. And if Rick needed me to take that thing out into the, down the valley and communicate back to the EOC, I could just unplug it from my home, take it out in the field, set up a portable antenna, and I'm on the air. So we can do that. And also one of the things that Rick Farrell has done for us is he used some of that grant money to purchase radios, and we actually built a Go box for the county. So we can deploy that. And I'll tell you a little bit more about how we've made use of that. When I say physical independence, I don't mean that we just go off willy-nilly and do what we can do. But modern radios, whether it be fire department, police department, sheriff's office, they have small radios as well. They're not high-powered radios, and of course we've got terrain that is difficult here. So they and we rely on repeaters to do our local communication. The beauty of amateur radio is we don't always have to rely on repeaters. So we can be what I like to call infrastructure independent. And so we might be using a certain frequency that requires line of sight. Well, we could put, if we had a difficult terrain, we could put one operator here, another up on a hilltop, and another back in some valley, and that individual could act as a relay, kind of a human repeater, if we had a disaster that damaged that stuff. The other thing we can do is for some of our more long distance communication, we don't need repeaters. We bounce signals off of the atmosphere. Actually, there are radio operators who bounce signals off the moon. They bounce them off of aircraft. They bounce them off of meteor tails. So it's a fun hobby that's got a lot of different aspects that people enjoy. So what can we do for folks? Well, we can provide tactical and logistical communications. Tactical communications are kind of the right now, do this. So if we needed to say, station number 1, I need you to go over where station 2 is. Station 2, I need you to go where station 3 is. And station 3, I need you to come back to the base. That's a tactical kind of communication. We also can provide logistical communication. Logistics are dealing with finding out what resources are in a certain place and how to get them from where they are to where they're needed. So most tactical communications, which is generally the kind of communications that the police and sheriff's department use, as well as the fire department, would be voice communication. So fire dispatch, somebody has a cardiac arrest, fire dispatch gets on the radio, calls out the closest station and dispatches them to that scene. Voice is great for tactical communications. Voice is less than great for logistics communications. So let's say we had a disaster here and we had to have 43 people go to a designated shelter. Now we need 43 cots, 43 blankets, 43 pillows, meals for 43 people, water. If you had a whole list of materials that you needed at a shelter, it would be tedious and error-prone to be communicating that by voice. And so we use data to do that. So one of the interesting modern aspects to ham radio is, and I mentioned it earlier, interfacing a computer and software with your radio. We have a program that we use that we can send email using radio frequencies without the internet. So I could have my radio, my computer set up at a shelter and type in this list in an email and email it over radio frequency directly to the EOC, and they know exactly what I needed, no errors. It's automatically error correcting means of communicating. We could also send imagery. There are portions of the radio spectrum that we can use and actually send full motion video, just like on television. It's a challenge. It's strictly line of sight, but it's really high speed. More commonly, we might take a still picture of, let's say, I took a picture of Morgan Ford Bridge when it was under 3 feet of water, and I could send that image over the radio. So we can do those kinds of things. Again, not a silver bullet, but we can do a lot of stuff. Also, if we had people at shelter, maybe their family heard that there was a flood in Morgan County, don't know where their family is, we can, on behalf of the people in the shelter, we can send an email. So that email system that can send without the internet also can interface with the internet. So if we had a flood here and my family in Oklahoma didn't know if I was okay, I could actually send an email over the radio from here to some other amateur radio station that had internet connectivity, and I could address that message to my parents in Oklahoma to say, Greg and his family are okay, we'll get back in touch with you when things settle down. So we can do those kind of messaging. And that was used in Puerto Rico a lot last year, connecting people with their families. So we'll get back to that in a moment. In fact, now we'll get to that. Most of you remember that last year was a mess in Puerto Rico. That island nation was pretty well wiped out, and all their communications were gone. The entire infrastructure was destroyed. The National Association for Amateur Radio worked together with the Red Cross and deployed a number of amateur radio operators to Puerto Rico and dispersed them. They had their go kits with them. Well, they had kits supplied to them. And they were dispersed around the island, and they were able to report what was needed, what was going on, and help people reconnect with their families. So I'm not saying we're going to have the hurricane that wipes out Warren County like it did to Puerto Rico, but there's plenty of opportunity for, disasters don't care about geography. And so we're a suspect, they're as likely to get something as the next county. And so if such a thing happens, amateur radio is one of the things that will help us recover from that. Our big concern here is we have these beautiful Blue Ridge Mountains, and if all of our normal communications are wiped out, those Blue Ridge Mountains are going to prevent us from line of sight communication with Richmond. Now granted, there's a repeater up on top of High Knob, but if we had some big storm that wiped that out, either took the tower down or just took all the antennas off of the tower. That's one of the things that happened in Puerto Rico, is there were towers that were still standing, but all the antennas were stripped off of them. So the only way to get to communicate with Richmond would be through what we call HF, or high frequency communication, where we bounce our signals off the atmosphere and back down. And so we've already done that and practiced to prove that it works. So in non-disasters, we like to practice our skills by providing community service. Any kind of a community event, so I've made sure that your police chief knows that if we had like hometown Halloween or a parade or any kind of event in town, and he's got his limited resources, if he chose to, he could ask us to be deployed here and there around the community just to report back to them, here's what's going on. Not asking us to do crowd control or traffic control, just observe and report. And so we're available for that kind of a service. We've also assisted at the air show that used to be at the Front Royal Warren County Airport. And even just last week, several of us went down and helped our colleagues in Page County. They had a 2-day triathlon with 700 participants. And so we had amateur radio operators deployed around the course, reporting when the first participant got there, when the last one, when somebody went down and got skinned up. So we were able to provide that service. So any kind of a community event. We helped out with the MMT 100, the foot race through the hills. I helped out a couple weeks ago in Highland County. They had a Mountain Mama road bike challenge, a 100-mile ride with like 10,000 feet of elevation change. I prefer to do it from my car with a radio microphone. But it doesn't have to be like a county event. It could be an organization event, and we're available to help that. And those are the kind of things that we like to do because it allows us not only to serve the community but to practice our skills. A couple pictures of us at the Virginia Air Show. You may have, if you were there, you probably saw our Deuce and a Half, which is, we basically use it as a great big battery. It's got solar panels on the top, huge battery bank, and basically we had members deployed around the airfield reporting back to Reggie, the airport manager, about what was going on, whether it was in parking, out by the fire engine, over by the beer garden, whatever. We had people around just so that Reggie knew what was happening on his airfield. So we had good participation with that. So we prepare by practicing. We hold a weekly net, and what a net is it's a gathering. We agree to gather at a particular time, a particular day, on a particular frequency. So every Sunday evening, our local group, Warren County UMCOM, meets on a local frequency to test our equipment, to share any kind of announcements with one another, and just to stay in touch with one another. We also have exercises. I told you that the hospital used us recently. Rick Farrell with the fire department used us he's had us take our Go Box that we built for the county, took it over to the current police station, made sure we could communicate back to the Emergency Operations Center. We took it to the new police station. We communicated from various fire stations. So we know that just about anywhere in the county we can communicate back to the Emergency Operations Center. We've also participated in statewide exercises. I mentioned Richmond earlier. There was a statewide exercise that the fire department wanted to participate in. So we had us communicate both voice and sending one of those emails over radio only to and from Richmond. And so we've proven that if that disaster occurs, or when that disaster occurs, we can still manage to get the message through. I also host a digital net, again, using this email program that we have. I hold a net every week. In fact, it's going on right now. My radio is sitting at home connected to one of my other computers, and it's waiting for people to send messages to it right now. I typically will get anywhere from 60 to 80 people that participate. I know you can't read this, I didn't expect you to, but each one of those little red or blue symbols with a call sign next to it is somebody in the state of Virginia that checked in a couple of weeks ago when we had our 100th net. So been doing this net for just about 2 years now. The first week we did it, we had 16 participants. And now I typically will have 60 to 80. And the thing that I like about this map is it shows us that we have capabilities in pretty much every corner of the state. And so I can go to the Virginia Department of Emergency Management and say, we have people in these locations that could actually help us out. And so they're appreciative of that, and that's another relationship that we have with the community partner. So how do you find us? Well, pretty much leadership and police, sheriff, and fire. If you need them to find us, they can get hold of us. We do have a presence on Facebook. It's not very exciting, but we're there. You can contact us through it. We basically use it to remind people about our weekly net, or to announce that we have participated in some exercise or something that's coming up. And then, of course, Field Day. I don't know if you've ever heard of Field Day, but every year at the end of June, the last full weekend of June, nationwide is a thing called Amateur Radio Field Day, and they encourage amateur operators to get out in a non-standard location, so not at your home. Go set up in a place where you don't have commercial power, be portable, and try to communicate with as many other amateur stations around the country, actually around the continent, as you can. And so the last 2 years, we have set up in Lions Park, there at the corner, the curve on Commerce Avenue, across from Wendy's and Springtime Nursery. Last year, we had about 80 visitors. The weather probably took us down to about 25 this year. The thunderstorms made us disconnect our antennas a couple of times, but we operated for 24 hours straight. And up here, the late night guys at 2 o'clock in the morning, and we were able to contact other stations across the country, Canada, Puerto Rico, I think Cuba. So we may be at that same location next June. The mayor came by and said we were set up in the wrong spot. He said you should be over by the gazebo. So we'll see if that pans out. I'm just reporting. So this turns out to be a pretty good spot for us because the park's usually busy in good weather, and so we get lots of people coming by. But that's us, and we're ready to help the community in any way we can. So again, thank you for allowing me to be here. Thanks for letting me take up some of your breakfast time. And I'm open for questions if anybody's got any. Here's my contact information if you need it. Yes?